there, this is Lauren Kimball for ANI 245, and in this series of tutorials I'm going to take you through the process of animating a walk cycle in Maya. Now before we begin, you're going to want to go ahead and create a new project for the assignment. You can do that by going to File, Project Window, clicking New, naming the folder, setting it to a location you can find it, and pressing Accept. Now I've already done this, so if I minimize Maya, I can see that there is a Project 3 directory waiting for me on the desktop. The next step is I need my rig. As you can see, I've already downloaded the Delta rig and placed it on my desktop. You can access the Delta rig from the Project 3 Dropbox or from the Exercise 4 Dropbox on the Canvas shell. Underneath her is the already unzipped file. So when you first download Delta, it's going to be zipped. So don't forget to right-click and extract all and have that file ready to go uncompressed. So when I double-click the uncompressed version of the file, I can see inside that I've got a couple of folders. The first one that I want to access is source images. This has all of Delta's textures, and I'm going to want to find the corresponding folder in the project directory, and I'm going to want to take her textures and just drag them on over to that source images folder. I'm then going to press back, and the next file I'm interested in is her actual rig. So I'm going to go over here to Scenes and drag Delta into the Scenes file. I'm not really concerned with the data folder or the workspace. It will regenerate a new workspace as we save in Maya. So I'm going to just open up Maya, and I'm going to press File, Open Scene, and it should show me the Scenes folder with Delta waiting to go. If you don't see Delta, maybe you were working on a different assignment before this, or maybe you just got home and Maya by default likes to look for the default project folder somewhere in the Autodesk folder. So if you don't see Delta, just go File, Set Project, find your project folder and press Set. And then when you press Open, you should definitely see Delta at that time. So at this point in the semester, you all know better than to just import a rig into Maya. The ideal way to go about this is to just go File and open the reference editor. Inside the reference editor, we click on the blue diamond with the plus sign to indicate that we want a new reference. We're going to click on Delta and click Reference. Alright, so once you have her loaded, you can close out of the reference editor and then zoom out, or just tap F to frame your scene. If you'd like to see your textures, tap 6 on the keyboard so you can see shaded view. I'm a little thrown by the shininess. I don't like the default lighting being so bright, so if you don't like it either, you can go to Renderer Viewpoint 2.0 and click on the Preference tab to dial down the intensity on the default lighting. So I'm going to click on 1 and just press Close, and that's a lot better. Alright, next thing that we want to do for setting up our scene is going over to the little orange guy running from the flying gear. That opens up our preferences. I'm going to change the playback speed from play every frame to 24 frames per second. I'm going to go to Animation and change my out tangents to stepped and click Save. The other thing I'm going to do, because it will annoy me to no end if I don't, is turn off the cache, that little blue line that keeps regenerating at the bottom of the screen. You can turn it off by going next to the loop button over here. There's this little orange, kind of looks like film strip with a play button. Turn that off and you don't have to worry about that blue line anymore. Okay, so we're just about ready to start animating, but I like to be able to, I want the ability to turn off controllers. I showed you how to do this process in class, but I'm going to go ahead and review it again here. I'm going to tap Control A so that instead of being in the attribute editor, I'm in the channel box, and I can see my display layers at the bottom part of the channel box. When I click on the display layers, I can see that there is a default display layer that comes with the rig. So when they put the rig together, they already had a display layer. If you click on the V, you can see that it turns everything off, which is not what I want, because I could just press Alt-1 if I wanted that. Nope, instead I want to be able to pick and choose which controllers are being seen at any given time. So to do that, I'm going to create a new display layer. I'll just create a new one with nothing on it yet. I'm going to double click it and I'm going to just name it my controls. Save. I'm then going to press spacebar, which opens up all the different viewports, and I'm going to go to the side view. Tap F to frame, and I'm going to press Alt 2 to hide her mesh. And now I'm going to select all these controllers here, right click, add selected objects. Doesn't seem like a lot's changed, but when I turn off the V, those controllers disappear. I'm going to grab the knees. I could right click and add those as well, but instead I'm just going to tap G. G repeats the last command that you used in Maya. Now I want to be careful because if I select either of the global controllers and add them to my controls tab, it takes everything with it, everything that they're parented to. So I gotta leave those alone. I'm going to instead just draw marquee box over the feet controls, and I'm going to press G. Oh wait, I gotta, my last command was undo, so I gotta go add select. There we go. Spacebar, and now when I look in the main view, all of those things are hidden. If these get on your nerves, so these are nerves curves that indicate where the elbow and knee controllers are, these little pull vector indicators so that you can control where the elbow and the knees go. If you don't like seeing those visuals, I can show you how to turn those off as well. So you're going to go find Delta in the outliner, unspool her. There's her rig, unspool that as well. So we got a picker, model. We're just going to go through these tabs until we find the group that has those in them. Unspool that. And we're just going to go through. There we go. Found one of them. It's a display curve group. Add that to the controls, and there's another one, G. Let's see if we can see another one named that. There it is, G, and there it is, G. And then I can spool this closed, spool this closed, spool this closed. So I can just go through my outliner and hide those. It doesn't matter, it's just if it irritates you, you can. Last, I'm going to grab the display cog back here, right click, and add that as well. So now I have everything hidden in this layer. I can go ahead and just display the ones that I want to show. Alright, so let's go ahead and start removing the controllers that we actually want to work with. When I approach a walk, I like to start with the legs first. They are the main mover. And I also get distracted when I have too many parts moving at the same time. So starting with just the legs and maybe the hips a little bit, if only for translation, those tell me what controllers I'm going to want to go for. So let's go back to the side view, and I'm going to grab these feet first. And I'm going to right click the control layer, and I'm going to say remove selected objects. Go back up here. And I know I'm going to want this. This is the root control. I'm going to right click and remove that as well. So now when I turn off that control, all I see is the root and the feet. Next, I want to save my scene because she's pretty much set up and ready to rock. You're going to go File, Save Scene, and this is the naming convention that I want to use. All right, because I already saved this file, I'm just showing you. First, I start with the title of the animation. It's a walk. And then I go _001 because this is the first iteration. And then after that, I always leave myself a little note. In this case, it's setting up my scene. That's what's in this. And I'm going to save it. I'll just replace that since I already did it. Okay. All right, so we're nearly ready to start animating. Since I have these three controllers, and I know that these three controllers, 1, 2, 3, I probably could have left the toes in the display layer. What's in here? That's just rotation. So I might just grab those and put them back. That way I have less to deal with, because I'm really just interested in these three baselines. So now that I have them, I would love to have a button that quickly selects just those controllers as I'm setting keys. Not that you have to have a key on every pose, but when you're starting out with pose-to-pose animation, you kind of do as a sort of anchor. You can clean up the tangents later, but when we're setting up the initial poses, we might want to key like all 3 controllers for starting. All right, enough chatter. I'll show you exactly what I mean when I get to that step. Let's just start with the shelf. I'm going to click on the gear up here next to the shelf menu. It's in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to click New Shelf. I'm going to name this Delta after the rig, and it'll create a brand new empty shelf with that name. Now I'm going to grab this root control and both of the feet, so I've got 3 selected, and then I'm going to go to Create, Sets, Quick Select Sets, and let's name this Feet _ root. Add to shelf. So you can't quite see root there, but it's peeking out enough that you can kind of understand what that button's about. All right, and now we're ready to start animating. For a basic walk, just as a guide for timing and the standard mechanics, I'm going to cite Richard Williams' textbook, The Animator Survival Kit. In it, we've got this graphic that shows the basic mechanics of contact, down, passing, and up, and it also shows us the time that it takes to complete one progression. So we're going to start from contact to contact and then back to the original contact to complete a full cycle. And that full cycle takes about 24 frames, which means it's 1 second long. So maybe I'll start by going into my scene and setting my timeline. We got it starting on frame 1. Let's end it on frame 25. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of a tighter workspace. All right, next I want to go ahead and set my first contact. So I'm just going to choose one of the feet to bring forward. Now I don't want to be as dramatic as Richard. Richard really exaggerated the poses for the sake of teaching. I don't need my character necessarily taking these giant steps. I'm thinking I'm going to go something a little bit more tame. Let's go with, see, that goes back maybe -20. Maybe think about 20. I'll do 20 on the front. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'll go with 20. I like to use round numbers when I'm starting out because that's easy for me to remember and make corrections to. Okay. So actually, instead of keying those channels, force of habit, I'm just going to grab all 3 controllers and tap S on frame 1. All right, let's start shaping these. I'm going to set auto key so that as I make changes, they're automatically going to happen. Let's start with this front foot. I want to go in. I could rotate the foot like this, but I think a better option would be to use some of these rolling options that exist inside the channel box. So this is ball roll. That's not what we want. Tip roll. Nope. How about heel roll? There's the ticket. Let's do a little bit of heel roll. It's still a bit up in the air. If we tap on the side view and let's reveal our mesh, we can see that it's still up off the ground a little bit. So I may want to take this main controller and just lower this down some. Let's go with -1.5. There, now it's touching. Okay, good. And then for the backmost foot, let's go ahead and add some of that ball roll. There we go. Let's go with about 5. That's a nice whole number there. And we've got 5 on the heel roll. So there we've got our first contact. So I'm going to take this frame here with all 3 of these selected. This is going to be the same pose at frame 25. So I'll just go to frame 25 and tap S so that, preemptively planted there. Let's go ahead and do our other contact pose, which is going to be on frame 13. And so what I'll need to do is set a key. So all 3 of the controllers are selected. And now I got to switch these feet around. Fortunately, that's pretty easy. So I just type in -20. And then over here, I'm going to type in +20. I'm going to put ball roll to 0 and heel roll to 5. And I'm going to do the same back here, where I take heel roll to 0 and ball roll to 5. So now, This looks a little silly, but there we've got our contact frames. I don't like quite how rigid the character is at this stage. I think this really doesn't matter, but typically when someone's walking, maybe I turn these controllers on. I don't want to add any rotation to the root, but I think I want to kind of, no, that's just the hip. I would have to rotate this if I wanted to push her forward a little. I'll do it later. I don't want to mess anything up right now, but I'm getting distracted. Let's focus on the legs. All right, so we got contact to contact to contact. Great. I could go ahead and save my scene. Be like, all right, I've got my contacts blocked out. Or I could say keys. I got my, I'll just call it a blockout. This is my blockout save. So I got a setup and now I got a blockout save. So I got my keys. Let's go ahead and do the breakdowns. The breakdowns are going to be our passing position and they're going to hit on frames 7 and frame 19. So I know that with this frontmost foot, so starting at frame 1 going forward to 7, the frontmost foot is going to be the weight bearing foot. So we're going to go ahead and set that translate to 0, and we're going to go ahead and set the heel roll to 0. I'm going to go over here and grab the controller for the backmost foot, and I could also set that to 0 as well as the ball roll, but I don't want to leave it there. Instead, I want to take my y-axis and lift this leg up. Now, when I was on the ground, I had used the rolling options for when I wanted to move the foot on the ground. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of the main reasons being that when the foot is flat on the ground, if you keep this controller flat on the ground, you don't have to worry as much about foot sinking. But with the foot that's up in the air on frame 7, if I were to bend the foot like it is in the reference, using like not heel roll, but tip roll, it's going to mess up how I track arcs in the future. So eventually I'm going to get to a point when I go in and start splining my keys, or my stepped keys, that I'm going to want to track the arc on my ankles. Remember, when we animate, we want to track the arcs on the ankles, on the wrists, on the nose, on the root. You can track arcs anywhere, but those are like the main ones that we want to track. In this instance, though, if I have my foot all the way up here and I apply a motion curve, the motion curve, like over here under the animation tab, I'm talking about these motion curves specifically. I guess they're called motion trails in Maya. They're going to attach to the pivot point. If I don't have this tip rolled, if I have it set to 0, then look, the pivot point's right at the ankle. So when I apply this motion trail to this controller, it's going to track really nicely. If I have this doing a tip roll this far away while I'm tracking, it's going to make it a little difficult up in the air. So I'm going to choose to do the opposite of what I was doing on the ground, just explaining the logic of why I'm doing it, and I'm just going to rotate the whole darn foot. And I want to go ahead and position this back a little bit too, because I want to have a little bit of a stronger silhouette. Let's go look at this from the side view. Yeah, maybe bring this up a little higher. There we go. Great. At this point, I probably want this to be more perpendicular to the ground, so I will let this go back to 0. Oh, that's a little too stiff. I don't want this to necessarily snap straight. Let's have a little bit of bend. Ooh, too much bend. Let's go with, let's see, the last one is at -1.5. What if we just did -0.5? There we go. That way it's not quite so stiff, but it's also not quite as far as the contact. All right. I think that works. So I'm just going to go back over to Delta's shelf and make sure I've set that key. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find the passing position over here at 19, middle mouse click, and set a key. Remember, I've got all 3 controllers set this time, so when I set my key, all 3 controllers get keyed. All right, so I need to switch my feet though. So this one's pretty easy. It's all zeros. So let's just take this and transfer this to this foot over here, and then we'll zero this one out so that it takes on this position. Now, if we had a picker for Delta rig, and Delta does come with a picker. What is a picker? A picker is like a small window that comes with a rig that's like a remote control. You can use it to immediately click on the different parts of your character without necessarily having the controls on. And what's really nice about pickers is that they often have features like mirror key. Meaning, like, if I have my feet positioned like this on the screen, I can click mirror key and it'll automatically flip the feet and key them for me. Now, Delta does actually have a picker. I've loaded the picker and it's very, very basic. It doesn't have any of those advanced controls that you'd see on like Mary's picker or on a more robust plugin like Animbot. So we got to do things old school. But just know that there are better ways to go about it, that there are animators that have preset buttons that automatically mirror poses for you. But since we don't have that, we're going to have to do this old school. So what I'm going to do is go over here and translate these channels to this foot. Fortunately, I don't have to just go copy them, paste them, copy them, paste them. I can grab this key, right click, go to copy, and then click on this controller, right click, and paste that key. Boom. And there we go. And I just want to check something real quick. Little off topic. Okay. So I did this technique earlier and something weird came up and I was just checking to make sure it didn't happen again. Anyway, so now we have switched which foot is going to go up. And we got to go back to this foot and make it go down. So we're just going to go to all of its translations and its rotate X, zero that out, and voila, we have switched feet. Okay, so now that we got our key and our breakdown, it's time to go for the down and the up poses to polish off and help this feel like a real walk. Right now it just kind of feels like a scissor kick kind of. I mean, it does kind of look like a walk, but it needs that extra flourish to really give it shape. So the contact pose is really easy to find because it's where the legs are furthest apart from one another. And the passing position at frame 7 is also really easy to find because the passing position is when one leg is passing over the other and the weight bearing foot is perpendicular to the ground of the character. Now, different walks are going to be slightly varied, but what I'm getting at is finding this pose and this pose is pretty simple. Finding the position between them could be a little bit trickier. So there's two ways that you could go about this right off the cuff. Everybody's going to animate differently. This is what I would suggest are two methods that are viable. If you want to stay in stepped keys, then you could grab the controller of the weight-bearing foot, go to the animation tab, and just ghost it. When you ghost it, you see like an onion skin. If you were a Toon Boom user, onion skinning is where you can see the before and after frame of a drawing. You can see that here with these controllers. I can see the previous key and the key that follows, and I could just manually eyeball it or maybe go in and round it up. So that's kind of clunky, but technically a way you could go about it. I think that's a little bit too much work. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the ghosts, and I'm going to get rid of this key. The other way to do it is just take advantage of interpolation. I'm going to go over here to the graph editor. I'm going to make sure I have the weight bearing foot selected, and I know that its journey this way is the translate Z axis. So let's go to translate Z. Let's grab frames 1 and frame 7, and let's just click auto. Let's just interpolate, or rather let's grab frame 1 and auto it. So we got just this one frame that is interpolated. See? Everything is still stepped except for this silliness right here. So why would I want to do that? Well, when I go to frame 4, I could set a key, put this all back into stepped key mode, and voila! We've basically figured out where the down position should hit. And looking over here, it hits at about 12.5. So that gives us something to start with. Now that I have it, I'm going to go ahead and click on ball roll, or not ball roll, heel roll, and set it to 0, because that's, you know, weight bearing foot there. And then I'm going to pose the back leg. So right now the back leg isn't positioned at all. And before I do that, let's go ahead and anchor this. I'm going to click on Delta, click all 3 of the controls I'm working with, and set a key. All right, so we have to worry about the other 2 controllers. I know that on the down, I want my character to go down on the y-axis, so let's start there. So on the contact frame, she's at negative 1.5, and she's at negative 0.5 here at the y-axis. So if I want her to go down from this, it's going to have to be like negative 2. So let's go to 4 and just type in negative 2. So it's just a little bit of down, not over exaggerating it, just getting the sense that some weight is shifting. And I could go a little further, but I don't want to go too far at this stage because eventually we're going to get to a point where we add some hip rotation, and look how that affects things. So I'm going to keep it kind of minimal at the moment. So we've got this foot planted. We figured out where it lives now, and we've taken the heel roll out. We went ahead and took this controller and we lowered it to about negative 2 so that it has a sense of going down a little bit, so we can feel on the y-axis some of that weight shifting. Now let's deal with this back leg. Back leg, couple things I could do. So between frame 1 and 7, we have this situation where the controller is rotating up. I could take out the ball roll and manually rotate this and get it into position. That is a thing I could do. It's a little clunky, but it would make it easier to track my arcs. The other way I could do it is, actually I think that's how I want to do it. It's a little clunky, but yeah. I want to go over here to my animation. I'll show you the other way to do it on the other foot. Let's just finesse this because I kind of like it. So I'm going to go over here and look at my motion paths, which are going to look pretty weird at this stage. I just want, the reason I'm doing this is I want to kind of start shaping that arc a little. Even though it's very rigid at this point, it's just, I just want to visualize it. I see that I'm probably going to have some issues with this. Oh, not bad, actually. That worked really, really well. There's very little here. I think I could just fix that pretty quickly just by adjusting this. Yeah. So I thought there'd be worse foot syncing. There probably will be worse foot syncing when I clean this as far as interpolation goes, because I bet you between these 2 frames there's definitely going to be some foot syncing. But I'll show you how to fix that with the graph editor. I really like the trade-off of being able to have my arc. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this motion trail by going into the motion trail editor and deleting all. Alright, so I like where that's going. I like that down. Let's go ahead and do that over here. So the next down pose is going to be on 16. So on 16, I'm going to take this and put in a, I think it was 12.5, wasn't it? Let's go back and look. Let's go back and look at this frame. 12.5, cool. So let's go over here. And I also, before I forget, got to anchor it, set a key on all the controllers. All right, over here, let's get that ball roll going. Now, I mentioned there's a different way to go about this. I don't have to necessarily adopt this. The other way to go about it would be to continue using the ball roll and the tip roll. So what I could do is continue this a little further, like, so what it was before was a 5, so let's just take it to about a 7. And while I'm doing that, also take this tip forward, like, no, like maybe 4. I just don't know if I'm gonna like that or not. Let's take a look from the side view and see how that's going. Okay, I like that. I don't like that arc though. So like there are trade-offs here. If I were to rely on the ball roll and the tip roll, what if I set this to 0 and no, I don't want to set to 0. Yeah, let's maybe dial it down though. Actually does look pretty good. Let me turn off the controls so they're not in the way. Let's see here. I like this better though because you can physically see that. But there's going to be trade-offs, and I'm going to show you what those trade-offs look like, however you decide to go about it. So if I were to just grab everything as it is right now, like all my controllers, and I were to automate them, like auto tangent them, I just want to show you kind of what happens here. So that's cleaner as far as not having any foot dipping, like there's a little bit of foot dipping, but the downside of using those controllers is they cause the leg to shake a little bit. See that? See how it kind of shakes them? Over here, this is a lot smoother. Look how nice that progression is on the first one. But here's the downside to it, is that this, oh my gosh, it totally didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Sometimes when I jump to rotation away from the tip roll and the ball roll, it's a situation that causes this to sink, but it didn't. In fact, this is giving me a lot more problems on this side. So let's go back in time, grab all these controllers and go back to stepped key mode. The verdict is in. I don't want to tell you how to go about it if there's something that you want to try, but I definitely think that the way to go on the down is to turn off the ball roll, tip roll, and just rely on the translation. I'm going to grab this, right click, and I'm going to copy the key, and I'm going to go back to my down over here, grab this controller, right click, and paste that key. So now we got this nice little progression on both sides. Cool. I like how that came out. And you got to see a couple of ways to go about it. So the next step is going to be keying the up. I'm going to go ahead and press Control Save to save my progress. I'm not going to do Save As because this is all in the blockout. I don't need to have multiple blockouts unless you want one, but this is just that starting blockout. Okay, so now that we got our downs, we can use a very similar technique for the up. Oops. If this happens to you, where when you grab the curve, it takes you into component mode, you can just tap F8 on your keyboard. I'm not sure why it was doing that, but here we are. So we know that the up position is going to be at frame 10. So I'm going to go to my load bearing foot here. This is the one that I'm going to want to interpolate because that one is the one that is sliding backward. So I'm going to go to my graph editor. I'm going to go to Translate Z again. So it was Z, right? Yep, Z. Go to Translate Z again. And on this specific key right here at 7, I'm going to go ahead and allow it to auto spline. And then I'm going to find the position at 10 and I'm going to key selected. And I'm going to go back over here and stepped key. Cool. Now I want everything to be keyed, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this and tap S. Cool. Let's go ahead and work on why this is called the up pose. It's called the up pose because this is where you start rolling off the ball of your foot. So let's go to the ball roll and start making this happen. I kind of want to see where we are at 13. At 13, we go up to 5. What if we took this to like 2.5? Like maybe we didn't go that high. Now, something that is, I want to wait till the next tutorial to touch on it, but I am experiencing something that's irritating me, and it's these floating hands. I mean, they're always floating, but what I mean is I hate how while she's moving, the hands aren't, and I'll talk to you all about how to address that next. So what I did, since this is a more realistic walk than the one in Richard Williams, I'm only having this kind of transition into 5. So if 5 is where the foot roll is here, I'm going to let it be at like 2.5 on the up pose and just let her be a little bit up, because typically when we're walking, you don't notice that action so dramatically immediately. And remember that when we start adding hip rotations, that's going to change things. So for right now, let's just do a little bit. Let's take this main controller here for the other foot. Go in the side view so we can kind of see what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and go back over here to animation and bring that curve back in. I just like to see what I'm doing, where I'm going with it. Yeah, I like that. Oops, wrong frame. Just getting a kind of rounded shape. All right, let's go ahead and turn off that motion trail and see how that's looking. I'm going to go ahead and do my playback at 13 instead of 25. I'm just paying attention to the hip for a second. I think that might work. Let's go ahead and copy that frame. So let's go to Delta, select everything. 7, 10. Oh, I did not set this back to 25 yet. There we go. And this is going to hit right at 22. So let's set the keys for all 3. And then let's go ahead, and this one is a little bit more complex. So I'm going to right click, copy this key, and I'm going to go over here and paste that key. Let's go back to our down here. Go back over here. Right click, copy, go back to 22, grab the opposing foot, right click, and paste. And so if we look at 10 versus 22, it's just a quick switcheroo of the feet. Let's go see. Yeah, it's vibing. It's vibing. I'm liking it so far. Now, I said that I would show you how to make it so that these hands weren't just like stuck in space. The reason that they're doing this, if we go click on the arm, so I've revealed the controls, I'm going to click on the arm. These hands right now are set to FK. We know that because when we grab the controller, it moves the whole joint chain, right?
So when I click on this arm, which gives you all the little extra settings that go with this, you'll see that when we go to IK follow, it's set to 0. And if I change it to 1, see how that arm moved? Now when I press play, the arm is moving with the body. The reason is because when it's set to 1, it is moving with the character. So if I move her chest, the arm is going to move with her chest. Whereas down here, this arm is set to global. So it's following the global controller. And the only reason this is moving with that is because the global controller is grabbing everything. Okay? So I'm going to go back over here. And it's not enough that I've set this IK to follow the body. I don't actually want IK when I'm dealing with the arms. I want more control when I eventually get to that part of the animation. So I'm going to go over here and just activate the IK-FK switch. Let's set this to 1. And look how the controls changed. They changed because FK controls are different. They're going to move more at like a hinge point, almost like a stop motion puppet where you move everything piece by piece. That's kind of how I want it when I do the arms. I want a little bit more control than what's going on with the legs. So let's go over here, grab this arm, and find the IK-FK switch and tap 1. Now, what's cool is the IK-FK switch, when you set it to FK, FK is already set to 1, meaning that it's not following the global controller, it's following the torso. So yeah, one less thing to worry about. Anyway, now when I press play, you don't have to worry about the hands just sort of sticking there. Alright, so I think we've done as much as we can at the blockout phase. Moving forward, we're going to start polishing, we're going to start applying some animation to the pelvis. We got some work to do, so let's go ahead and save this as our final save for our blockout before we move on to polish. Alright, so polish is probably the wrong word when last I left off on the recording. Interpolation, a better word. We're going to do our first spline pass. That doesn't mean we're at all close to the finish line on this, even though we've got these awesome keys in place and it looks like it's pacing really nice. There's still a lot of work to do as far as finessing our steps, as far as addressing the straight ahead view of looking down the barrel of the Z-axis, because notice that there is no shifting side to side to show that the body is trading weight between the load-bearing legs. But that's all stuff that we can do with interpolation. The blockout, setting up these keys, that's just for the beginning. When we have the spline pass going, we can actually do all these adjustments in interpolation now that we've got a strong foundation. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a spline pass. Now, if you ever watch animators online that show the progression in their demo reel, they'll go from stepped keys to spline pass. And I noticed students in the past who thought that meant that everything should be splined. A little bit of a misnomer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the graph editor. I'm going to go grab Delta's controls because this needs to be understood. So if I were to grab all of these keys, in fact, let's just go with translate Y. What are we looking at? We're looking at the root control right now. So right here, the root control, translate Y. Let's grab all these and let's hover over these buttons. That one's the spline button. Boom. Immediately, do you see a problem? One of the things I ask you to look out for, unless it's intentional, is to avoid overshot tangents. An overshot tangent is any time a tangent curve goes beyond the key. So in this case, we're dealing with the up and down y-axis of the controller, of like the root control. And very specifically, like on the up pose, for instance, I wanted the character to go no further than this. If on a frame before that they continue to go higher because of this overshot tangent, it may very well cause the foot to levitate a little bit off the controller, for instance. Over here, this is particularly troublesome because this is basically being held here between these frames. and now it's got a bit of an overshot tangent, which means something that I may have wanted held isn't being held. So all of that to say, pay attention to the type of interpolation you apply. So next to splined, you have clamped. If I apply clamped, you don't notice a huge difference right off the cuff, but between those two that held value, between those two that held value, they adjusted it so that there was no overshot tangent. There's still an overshot tangent up here, but not down there. So you can see that clamped causes a bit of a change. We've also got plateau. Plateau is going to basically do very similarly to what auto does. You see there's not a big difference. What plateau does is it never allows overshots to occur. So plateau, preventing overshots. Clamped is going to prevent overshots where something holds a value. And spline is just going to go willy-nilly with it. And then auto is trying to guess, but it often looks an awful lot like plateau. All right, so those are just some variations. It doesn't change the fact that all animation curves can be broken into linear, flattened, and stepped, but these are just different relationships for looking at the whole. I hope that helped. I'm going to go ahead and grab everything and just highlight it and use auto for like best guess. And then I'm going to press play and see how it's looking. Nice. You might notice a little bit of a pause at the end. That's because frame 1 and 25 are the same, and everything else has constant progression except here. So I probably want to change this to 24. Now let's press play. Yeah, that's definitely helping. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to save my progress. I know it's not big progress, but I'm just going to 003 underscore spline. Let's call it initial spline pass. All right, just so that I remember what I did here, because we got a lot of work to do. I'm going to go over to my animation gear under the animation section, and I'm going to change this from stepped to auto. Auto span. There you go. So now every time I set a key, it's not going to automatically step the key when I set a key. Instead, it's going to automatically be auto, and then I can go in and adjust it as needed. Okay, so everybody animates walks a little differently. One thing that I like to do is break up the action into other controllers when able. So what do I mean by that? I could go ahead and continue animating the weight shift and the hip rotations on the root controller here and do all that stuff that's necessary, but I like to break things up amongst controllers when a rig gives me that option. So if I go over here and I activate controllers, I see that I have a second pelvis controller. I'm going to right click, remove that from the separate controls, and I'm going to use that to break up my action and make things a little bit easier to control. So what I like to do is use the root to handle translation. So we're talking up and down motion, I'm talking side to side motion, and then I like to use this controller to actually go in and, do all the side to side wonkiness. All right. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and delete static channels on just the main controller, and I just realized there should not be a plateau on this controller. Let's see here. Down, passing, up, contact. That should be down. So it should be what this is what should be on frame 16. There we go. All right, I was just threw me off, because even though it was helpful for explaining plateaus earlier, it really shouldn't exist on this. So that is better. Okay, so I want to use this for translation, and the most obvious translation is going to be moving side to side. Okay, so on the contact poses, we're going to be dealing with keying translation, right? So Shift W will key all my translation values. So that's going to be the X channel as well. And I know I'm going to want it there, and Shift W for 1 on 13. And let's go ahead and reveal 25 and press Shift W. So there we go for translate X. And then on the passing position, that's where, this leg is being swung forward and all the weight is shifting over here. I'm going to want to do something like this. Let's see. Let's go with 2.5. Okay. So 2.5, and then the other passing pose is over here. Let's go with negative 2.5. Cool. All right, let's see how that's looking. That's a start. It looks wonky because we don't have any rotations yet. We got to start talking hips. I would love to go back down and start, polishing the feet, because they're also kind of bland. But the truth is, we have to address this hip some before we deal with these feet, because how this hip rotates is going to change the nature of how the feet settle. So let's go ahead and start taking care of that.